by two. Marauder, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. This is our bonus journey, more than a bonus episode. We have been on a journey rediscovering and revisiting Red Dwarf, way back from Series 1 all the way through to the latest outing, Promised Land. And we're now in the final throes. We're now looking at Series 12 and the Promised Land. And as usual, I'm Scott Weatherly, your regular host, and I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing?
I'm surviving another day in the dystopia parallel universe that we seem to be inhabiting. How are you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm sort of, I'm gassing up the Jeep out the back. I'm making sure I've got full rations in case they ask for full Mad Max at some point in the future. It is. It's crazy times when we're recording this. So I think, we off air, we've had a good discussion about sort of basically how crazy the world is at the moment. And so we're going to be jumping into space now and well into the future to discuss how crazy Red Dwarf is. As I say, we're going to be talking Series 12. This is obviously a Dave UK TV series. And then Promised Land, the latest, and possibly, touch wood, we'll see what happens, and we'll talk about it, last entry in the Red Dwarf saga. And in addition to that, we're going to be listing out our favourite episodes from each series. But getting to Series 12, so Julian, what were your thoughts on 12, having gone through sort of a couple of series now of the Dave years?
Yeah, I mean, I had seen 10 was the last I had seen. So 11 and 12 were new to me, and Promised Land was new to me. I thought 12 was a step down from 11. And, I'm glad to have it. I think it's good. It's certainly no, Star Wars prequels or anything. It's good stuff that I'm glad is added to the canon. But I thought it didn't have the sort of high notes for me that 11 did.
Yeah, we talked about previously about them sort of repeating themselves a little bit. And I definitely feel it in this series. In Series 12, there's a couple of episodes I'm like, I feel like we're sort of revisiting themes and stuff that, could do with freshening up. But yeah, and what about Promised Land as well? Because that's a very different sort of, just before we get to it later, but initial thoughts on that as well.
Well, I kind of love Promised Land. I think Promised Land it's good. I don't think it's, mind-blowingly good, but it's good. And it's certainly better than Back to Earth. I like Promised Land an awful lot, I have to say. For me, of the Dave stuff, Series 11 is the best of the main series. And I'd put Series 11 and Promised Land as, just really solid, excellent dwarf continuations. What about you?
Yeah, there's some really, really good stuff in Promised Land. I really enjoy it. There's a couple of bum notes. There's a couple of jokes that don't land, but there's some really, really good stuff in it that we'll get onto. And I'm glad that they do a couple of things. I'm really quite glad that they get round to, and I think technology's allowed them to do so.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about too.
So yeah, but let's get back into it. So Series 12, we start with the first episode is Cured, and once again the boys come across another outpost. This is from the United American Empire, and they sort of find basically another science outpost. There's lots of these dotted around in deep space, and it's someone who allegedly has found a cure for evil. and has got some test subjects there as well. So, what were your thoughts on Cured?
I think it's okay. I think it's solid, but not great. I mean, it feels a little off to me. It feels, and again, I keep sometimes saying this that some of these seasons feel a little off, and I don't know why.
Mm.
In this case, I kind of felt like some of the humor was a little on the nose. Like the characters are still the characters, but they're almost like they feel like a little stripped down versions of the characters. Like they've just kind of been reduced to their essential component, and they say just right on the nose what you'd kind of expect them to say. Um, I do think it's great fun, like watching dinner with Hitler and Vlad the Impaler and Stalin. Um, sadly, we don't get Murdoch in there, but that's a nice little joke. So I mean, there are things in this, and I think overall the plot is kind of like a parody of a Star Trek episode. I do kind of hate like, oh, okay, another space station with a weird scenario. But more than that, I hate the sort of plot device of like, oh, a protoplanet is going to collide with this moon. You know, why are we always arriving at stuff just as it's about to be destroyed by natural forces? What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. This is, I would say, it's a relatively weak episode for me. Sort of like it's fine, but I agree with what you're saying. As an opening episode, it doesn't really grip me with the series. It's fine is all I can say about it. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
characters playing the villains. I mean, not even the villains, the cured villains. You got Hitler, Stalin, Vlad the Impaler. I forget who the woman is, but like they've got these
Messalina.
Messalina. I can never pronounce that's
Uh-huh.
it. So you have these characters and stuff, and you think, oh, that's interesting. This idea of curing evil and sort of stuff. And I like the sort of the idea of sort of why they weren't allowed to do anything more with this. Why could they not turn this into something? It was because, well, actually, evil generates cash. Well, without
Mm-hmm.
evil, there's no wars, and without no wars, there's no industrial military complex and stuff. And so I kind of like that as the theme. Is like, oh, that's clearly what they're trying to get at. But as you say, it sort of feels so on the nose. That
Mm-hmm.
they sort of, but the moment they sort of explain that, you're like, oh, so that's what you want to say. All right. So what is the rest of the episode going to say then? It's sort of, I don't know. It's a really disjointed episode to me. I mean, the ending as well. I, I both like and I find annoying is the whole thing of who is the psychopath,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the declaration that Kat is a psychopath. I it's funny when they play it off like he's like moving from the good from the boys from the dwarf to the sort of the villain side and back and forth. That's sort of entertaining for a bit, but it also throws into this point of like, well, you've always highlighted that he's narcissistic, he's other things, but he's not human. He's
Right.
a cat, so he's not a psychopath. He's a cat.
Yeah.
um, and so it's sort of, I don't know, it feels just sort of like that joke feels a little one note. And again, it's one of the things it's
Yeah.
never going to be touched again. Doesn't make a difference, but yeah, it's a little light on humor for me. This one,
Yeah. I mean, I think that as we're talking about it, it occurs to me that it might make more sense kind of lumped into the category of seeing Jesus as a character or the Kennedy assassination, where it's a little more sort of like one of those episodes where you say, oh, I can't believe they went there. Um,
mm,
I mean, Lister jamming with Hitler, it's not really funny. But then again, like the Jesus stuff isn't that funny either. The JFK one is more wobbly, I think, than that. But I do kind of have an affection for those episodes because they're so daring. And I think that this episode sort of wants to be one of those kind of outrageous Red Dwarf episodes.
yeah.
And it just, like there are moments of that, but it doesn't really come off as outrageous.
No, I agree, and I think, like you say, they keep sort of and they lean into the whole Hitler thing a bit too much,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's sort of the idea of sort of like, gentle Hitler and all this other stuff. It sort of it plays well maybe for a scene or two, but the whole thing of, like, say leading up to them, having a jamming session playing guitars, like you say, it's not as funny as they think it is,
Mm-hmm.
or as shocking for that matter, because especially this, this was this was a couple of years ago, but even by this time, like, this notion is not new. I mean,
Right.
up to recently, you've had like Jojo Rabbit and others that have sort of like done something similar.
Yeah. There's that Netflix series like Look Who's Back.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
Jojo Rabbit, which I liked quite a bit.
mm. So it's not new. It's not particularly shocking. It's they could have gone all the way, and they could have done more with it, and maybe been a bit more risque and a bit shocking with it. But it feels that they pull back, and yeah, I don't know. It just feels sort of neutered a little bit.
Well, that's funny because Lister's fear is being castrated when they go through this sort of, Cat is drowning, Rimmer's
Yeah,
buried
yeah.
alive, Crichton's beheaded. I mean, that stuff should have worked better too. I mean, I think that like Cat drowning is kind of interesting, but
Mm.
the whole Rimmer being buried alive and then he has a Zippo with a Hitler on it, is, again, I mean, it should work. It should be more entertaining than it is.
Mm.
I mean, we've had a lot of episodes where we see sort of like alternate versions of themselves, or like Injustice, where we get like a mind probe or the Inquisitor. And those are supposed to, like, I think we've agreed that, like, when those work, they work because they seem on for the characters, and it seems like it is both fun in the moment and revealing of those characters. And I think
Mm.
here we get sort of like to see the characters' worst fears, and yeah, they're kind of like, yeah, blah, I mean, uh,
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like, the visual of Crichton waking up with his head on a broom pole is quite a good visual. I mean, like I said, this technology allows them that, you see the face move. It's clearly like Robert Llewellyn's face CG'd
mhm,
onto things stuff, and it looks pretty good. But again, like, it's not the worst thing, because what we've seen Crichton without his body, or even, or the body without a head, numerous times before.
right.
So it's not a huge, that the stakes don't feel high. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
he's literally taken his own head off multiple times, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it seems odd that I agree with you. Like, it's a good visual, but I thought, why, why is this his worst fear?
yeah. It's just, yeah. And the thing again, leaning into the cat drowning. Well, that sort of, yeah, cats don't like water, and yeah, and then obviously, like, Rimmers is just being buried alive again. Well, actually, surely we've actually learned in a previous episode that Lister's the one who's claustrophobic. So
Right.
it'd be better for him to be locked in a small place that could potentially be on fire. Like it, yeah. Again, it's one of these things. It feels like it's been put together, but not given the sufficient thought that I think it could do. And in fact, that some of the other episodes will have.
Hmm.
Um, it's almost like I think we find this with a lot of the series. Like, some of the episodes have got quite intricate plots or quite intricate thoughts going into them, and then others, it's almost like, yeah, one more pass at the script, and you could have probably done a lot better at this. Um,
Yeah, and I think you make an excellent point about the claustrophobia of Lister. That there's this kind of like, it's weird in Red Dwarf what sort of gets to be continuity and what doesn't, right?
mm,
Because I mean, there are plenty of episodes that just end on a joke that is essentially a cliffhanger that's never resolved, right?
yeah,
Um, so obviously certain things are just not considered serious continuity. Lister's fear of enclosed spaces, is claustrophobia, is just sort of never referenced again, and you called it at the time, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange how they love these callbacks, but then they don't want to kind of go too deep, even when there's no reason not to.
Yeah, it's like I said, and the resolution to the episode of like, well, Cat's a psychopath, or this is registered as a psychopath on the machine, but like, he ends up sort of siding with the Red Dwarf crew. It's fine. It's a nice little, it puts a little bow on it and stuff. But again, like if that had happened earlier in the episode, it would have been more interesting. I think the episode would have been more interesting if at least the second half of the episode was Cat having to question this idea of whether or not he does have any feelings or cares for the rest of the crew.
Right, kind of like begin at the ending, sort of, it's that denouement that's always interesting.
Yeah, like that's the bit that'll be more interesting to see. Like you could there's plenty, I'm not the writer, but I'm pretty sure you could make lots of humour out of this notion of sort of whether or not Cat cares or has any, emotional attachment to the rest of the crew in some way, and explore this idea of his narcissism or his, or him being a psychopath. But it's not. It's just used as a bit of a sort of like a bit of a bow to resolve the episode. And I don't know. I just find that a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, you're pointing at something that I think is really deep and hard to pinpoint about this episode, which is, like I like Cat. Just to refresh readers' memories, Cat is, there's one psychopath that turns out to be Cat, which feels right to me. But then, Cat goes over to the other side and he is given a gun. He's going to kill his Red Dwarf comrades, and he just guns down, just shoots the villain at close range. And he's like, all right, let's go eat. And I like the joke that he just kills the villain and he's fine with it. But as you say, like, there is this thing on Red Dwarf where the characters dislike each other. They seem, every time that Rimmer is in trouble, Cat just says, "Oh, that's a bonus too," right? What's the bad news? And there's this kind of constant joking about how happy they would be if other members of the crew around them died. And now, but that always seems to be kind of lighthearted. You don't know how true that really is, right? Like, Cat would probably be okay if Rimmer died, but Cat goes along on the mission to save Rimmer. And clearly, Lister and Crichton care for Rimmer. But here Cat seems to have shown, no, I'm quite serious, and there is a kind of like disturbing aspect of that. And I think it's more disturbing because it plays on that element of Red Dwarf, the fact that the crew kind of don't like each other. Mm-hmm. And it just takes it goes over that line. And then there's no exploration, like you say, of sort of like, oh, what does it mean that Cat seems to really be a sociopath? He really means this all the time when he jokes about the crew dying.
Yeah, and that's it. And so it leaves this sort of like on that note, and it's sort of that, and that's it. And again, it's sort of, and when we get to when we get to Promised Land as well, the idea, some of the ideas that were explored in that, and the way that sort of ends as well. When we get to it again, it sort of explores a little bit of Cat, but again, he sort of at the end of that, he admits, no, Red Dwarf is home, and you're sort of thinking, right. Okay, but that's great because I actually find that more satisfying. There's potential for him to go off and actually join his kind, the kind that left him behind, all this other stuff. And he's like, no, being trapped on this ship is actually where I'm supposed to be. And that's all a bit more satisfying. But again, it's sort of like, okay, well, I mean, a couple of years before, but you've still already talked about the fact he's a psychopath. So I don't know. There's just something there that I would be more satisfied if they explored it some more in some in some way.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a good point.
Yeah. So that's Cured. Any more thoughts on Cured before we move on?
No, not really. I mean, I think, I will say this. Even the episodes that feel lackluster, even the episodes that we criticize, if this were an episode of another series, we would say it's filled with good ideas. You've got Hitler playing guitar with a main character. You've got one of the main characters shown to be a sociopath and committing a cold-blooded murder, at the end. This is an interesting show. If this were a pilot of some weird sci-fi show on Netflix, for as lackluster as this episode is, we would probably say, "Oh yeah, I'll give that a go." So I mean, I do think sometimes we sound more negative than we really are. I still think this is, it's a satisfactory, but it does feel kind of lackluster compared to the Red Dwarf bar that's been set. But we're grading on a curve.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's when it rests amongst sort of like the rest of the Red Dwarf episodes. I think that's sort of, it's got to be supposed to see in that context. Okay, so moving on. So we now move to the second episode, Siliconia, and this is we come across, or the crew come across a ship populated by a bunch of 4000 series mechanoids that have broken their programming and liberated themselves, and basically become a freedom fighting force for all mechanoids across the galaxy. And in order to learn about the oppression that they have put Crichton under, these other droids, these other mechs, transfer, I should say, the consciousness of Lister, Rimmer, and the cat into mechanoid bodies for them to experience what it's like. Yes. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think this is a lot better than that first episode. I don't think it's quite a classic, but it's good, it's amusing, it's clever, it's fun. There are moments that feel really good. I love that Rimmer in the mechanoid body is the one to sound the alarm and betray the others, out of his sense of like, he loves Space Fleet, right? He loves that sense of order and belonging and kowtowing to his superiors. He just has been given new superiors to kowtow to. There's a lot that I like here. I'm less charmed by them being in robot bodies. I guess it's kind of an inversion of Crichton becoming human. We can't do that again. So let's kind of invert the scenario. And I like the twist that there are Mark II models that are, enslaved by the Mark IIIs that, I mean, it's good fun seeing the Mechanoid Liberation Front dressed as Black Panthers and all their, liberation theology stuff. But then you find out, oh, they have slaves too. That's a nice twist, but it's also like, it's also oddly conservative, right? It's this kind of like, nobody's really any better. Sort of thing that I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. It's okay. It's clever. It works. But, yeah. What are your thoughts?
I know what you mean. It has. I do enjoy this episode. I think there's some really interesting sort of thoughts, some interesting moments in it, and like you say, them being transferred. I like that Rim, like I say, gives in. And as they start to lose their personality, he's the first one. And one of the great things of sort of, again, of Chris Barry sort of stepping up as an actor, sort of the fact that he actually falls into almost like a Crichton-esque voice. When he's mopping, he's like, actually, I'm enjoying the calm of this mopping. Like, I no longer have to worry about competing with people or the order of things. Like, he's almost like Zen. He's sort of like, he just falls into that place. And the realization for him that actually giving in to this and becoming a mechanoid may be a good thing. Again, I like that little bit of Rimmer that, for him, it might be a better place. And the other two sort of like, Craig Charles and Danny John Jules sort of like do some bits and pieces in it. But Chris Barry sort of like really works in that respect. But again, I like this sort of the ideas that go with this, and the idea of almost like the hypocrisy of it. That we're liberating us because we're, there should be no oppression apart from them. They're 3000s, and a lot. When they list off the sort of like the difference between them, and it's so minor. Like
right.
It's so I like some of that stuff. That was really funny.
Oh, I do too. That's the like kind of Voltaire thing, right? Like, what? Well, of course we can't let those people live. They believe in the wrong color of, um, of shirts or whatever. Going back to the cats in the first episode.
But I like that it goes both ways. It's not that it's not so much that the sort of the 4000s are oppressing the 3000s and the 3000s are fighting back. It's like, well, no, the 3000s have almost accepted their place. That well, someone's got to keep them. And, they're slightly taller than us, and they've got that wonderful matte finish, which I love. That thing of sort of, and they've accepted their place. And it takes sort of like Lister and the cat, and to sort of go, well, that's really bizarre. And it's this sort of thing. And I kind of like the fact it ends in a sort of a fight at the end of it. Like, whatever it is, it always comes down to this sort of aggressive sort of resolution, which is, again, it's all quite well done. I quite enjoy this episode. It's funny to me. I actually do find it quite charming to see them dressed in the Crichton makeup. So that for all these years that Robert Llewellyn's obviously had to put with wearing this, it's finally going to go on the other guys. It is quite good fun. This episode does make me chuckle. I think there's moments when they have like the support group.
Oh yeah, that's good.
It's really good fun. It's a solid episode. I mean, again, it's this exploration of sort of servitude and what is it that Crichton has that makes him different, and it's the fact that he may not be. We're going back to Crisis from the last series. Yeah, he may not be as good as Butler, that droid, but you know what? He is still unique. He is still an important member of the crew. This is to me. This is quite a solid episode. I'll say a solid episode. It's a step up from Cured in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's a good one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree that it's a solid episode. I think it's sort of less than a classic, but it's a solid, strong episode that we'd probably be happy in any season. That support group is very good. The sort of like calling ourselves robot slave survivors. Our heads are sensibly shaped. Sort of mantras. Is very good. Lister trying to say "smeg hand" is very fun. I think for me the ending is a little fast. The gladiatorial combat is more clever than funny for me. Like I see it as kind of like, oh, this is you're right that things devolve into the fist fight. I see it as very much kind of amok time. Kirk and Spock fighting. And the idea is that they're doing it, but with mops, right?
Yeah.
Which is a funny conceit, right? But, and it's got slow-mo shots of the mops and, it's clever. But then you have them, the whole idea is they want to get to this Siliconia space station, right? Which is kind of like, it's not Silicon Heaven. It's a real place that they believe in. And then abruptly at the end of the episode, I mean, just as abruptly as they, we haven't mentioned that, there's this whole kind of thing with Lister's guitar has been found because, he threw it out of the airlock in the previous episode when he was, scolding himself as his own father. And then, they do this sort of like claw hand to fetch the guitar. And as they do, the robots do a bigger claw hand and grab Starbug. Which, okay, it's funny, but, just as abruptly as the robots came in, they leave and all of a sudden they're at Siliconia. Again, like, how long have you been searching for Siliconia? And it happens as soon as we meet them, and what they get an upgrade, right?
Yes. Everyone gets an upgrade, so they're all become equal, sort of thing. Apart from Crichton, who chooses not to take the upgrade. which is again, like you say, it's bizarre, but yeah, it feels to me like the last two episodes. In fact, I felt it in some of the others as well. Is there's almost like that with the scripts and sort of there's a joy in exploring a certain theme and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of like then they go, oh, actually, we've reached 20 minutes. I've got 3 minutes to resolve this. All right, we better bang this on. And it sort of felt both Cured and Siliconia sort of have a similar feeling of that sort of, just sort of abrupt resolution. Sort of like, oh, we're back to status quo, back on. And there were moments of that in both 10 and 11. Of like, yeah, we've explored this idea. I really like it. Oh shit, got to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder, sort of like, if because obviously it's Doug Naylor now that's obviously doing the Soul sort of production. So was it Rob Grant and everything in the past that sort of like was making them a little tighter in some way? I don't know. It just a lot of times they just sort of come to that sort of just a stop.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens a couple of times more in this series as well. That I don't know, maybe if they was given an extra 5-10 minutes, maybe he could have explored it further.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's stuff that could be trimmed, or I mean, I think the whole guitar stuff is a little silly. What do we need? What is the point of the guitar stuff? I mean, we had him jamming with Hitler, right? Why do we need that guitar at all in this episode? I mean, it kind of comes back at the end, but it's not really important, is it?
No, again, it's that sort of it's almost like that Simpson effect, isn't it? Like the episode starts on one note and then gets completely sort of diverted elsewhere. So, as you said, this sort of revisits the idea that he, when he was in Fathers and Sons from the last series, like you say, he's scolding himself and he ends up shooting his guitar into space because he hasn't joined the engineering program or whatever. Well, 2 years later, whatever, they found it. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So that's going to be, there's going to be something, maybe they're going to revisit the rest of that. Nope, it's literally just an excuse to get Starbug to go out and get the guitar. And then Starbug can be nabbed. So it's a device, isn't it, really? It's just a bookend device that takes up time more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, and I would be happier, as you say, with a little more on the back end. And I find Lister's inability to play guitar somewhat tedious at this point. It's fine. Occasionally it's very funny that he's just so delusional about his own ability. But we've seen that. This is so nitpicky. And again, I think, I mean, I have this as, a 7 out of 10. This is a solid episode. I'm happy with it. It was fun. It's a kind of return to normal, but not to quibble, but I think like, okay, so if you jettison that guitar 2 years ago, what is the course Red Dwarf is on? There is this sort of like, how many human outposts are out here? How far? I mean, is Red Dwarf like 20 years closer to Earth out of 3 million? Well, they stopped for hundreds of years in that one episode. So I don't know. I mean, that's very nitpicky, but
yeah, I agree. It's just it's a device, and the thing, it takes up time at the beginning when you could be like, surely this could have just been, all in all, I think the whole guitar thing is in order to facilitate the grabby or joke. That is it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And it's sort of like, well, it takes up an awful lot of time. It would have been there's better ways to have contracted that opening scene so you can spend more time exploring the sort of the droid ship and that. But yeah,
it's still a good episode.
It is. I say I really like some of the stuff in the middle. I think I really do enjoy some of the stuff on the droid ship. One of the things, like, they get to choose their own names and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
You know, it does actually sort of there's some interesting bits, and it's funny. This one just sort of like this one makes me laugh a lot more than Cured did.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it definitely is amusing and fun. It has that sense of fun that we like
Mm.
in the best Red Dwarf episodes. It lets us kind of ignore a quibble here and there. Um, I do come back to like, what is the Siliconia space station? Who built this? Why does it give out upgrades? I mean, at that, do I care?
Yeah, at this point, I don't think you're supposed to ask.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it's one of those, isn't it? It's sort of like, oh, okay, that's their journey. Don't worry about that too much. Because usually you could be going, that's quite impressive technology. Surely we should be boarding that say space station and see what else they've got that could help. But yeah, not really supposed to ask that question. I don't think. Um, and that's the thing. Like I say, it's nitpicky. We can nitpick because a lot of it is very, very good.
Right.
But unfortunately, it becomes a little bit like once you do scratch away, you're sort of like, oh, again, one more pass over the script could have made it a little bit tighter, maybe.
There is that kind of another moment that is good is the sort of like, I've allowed others to think for me, the sort of very Monty Python like, we're all individuals, I'm not, uh,
Yeah,
sort of the irony of how we are kind of, obviously it's about humans and not droids, right, is a metaphor, that we are a collectivist species, and that even the idea of Western individualism is something we have been taught, right? This central irony, and I do think that's a fun, clever, good sequence there.
yeah, that's it. They do keep tapping into some really, really good ideas. Um, but yeah, so Siliconia. I mean, 2 episodes in, I think it's fine. Is where I'm at with this sort of series. I'm still like, yeah, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. But this next episode is actually, I mentioned on the last episode. I sort of said, oh, there's a couple of episodes I'm interested to see where your thoughts go on this one. And Time Wave, so the third episode in the series, Time Wave, was it was one I was like, I'm really interested where Julian goes with this one. Again, there's a bit of a device. There's a literal time wave which shoots
Yeah.
objects back and forth through time. Never really explained in great detail, but because of it, Red Dwarf comes across another ship that is populated, and when they board the ship, they find that the crew have been now under the mandate of a law which prevents you from chastising or judging anyone else and the work that they do. And so, yeah, it turns out that it's just it's hard to describe. Basically, it's chaos.
Hmm.
And the ship again is about to crash into a moon on a fixed trajectory, and
Of
they've got
course. Why
yeah,
not? Every place we board, it's about to die for some reason.
yeah. Well, this one feels a little bit. Um, we've said before about ones repeating, and stuff, but this one is almost straight after because again, this is going into this feels so similar to Siliconia in many ways that I find it quite jarring. I mean, there's some good moments in this, but again, the theme is going to another area's another location, another culture,
Right.
and then having to sort of like that culture then wants to transfer you in or change you in some way so that you can appreciate their culture. Like in Siliconia, it was they get changed into mechanoids. In this one, they want to remove their judgment and their bitterness and all this other stuff to make them, so they can adhere to this law. And it comes to a conclusion. But what were your thoughts on Time Wave?
Well, just to follow up on what you're saying, I also felt that it was similar to Siliconia. I think it's also similar to Cured in the sense
Mhm.
of it's about, we are on this thing that's about to be destroyed. Do we leave them? It's more trouble than it's worth. Do we just let them die? I mean, why are we even doing this? So I mean, there is that sense of repetition, and 3 episodes in, I shouldn't have that much sense of repetition.
Yeah.
I think this is a weaker episode than Cured. Um, I think that it has a few good moments, but I don't think really much is working here. Um,
Mm.
I think it's a sort of parody of PC culture. Um, I mean, do we read? I couldn't figure out, like, is this mocking excessive PC culture, or is this mocking, uh, you know, um, sort of in a Last Jedi kind of way, critics, which is a trope in in writing, especially science fiction, right? That somehow criticism is bad. But I mean, that doesn't end up to be the case, right? There were a few things that I like, but mostly I feel like even I have this problem where I think I don't know how this rule is really implemented, right? Because if you can say nothing negative, other people can perceive things as negative that aren't necessarily negative. I mean, even mentioning that, Rimmer has killed the entire crew, right? Well, you can't then talk about what has happened in your past without
Mm.
implicitly criticizing someone. Um, Now, I mean, I get that it's supposed to be dysfunctional, but I mean, there are things that are mildly clever, like the guy in jail for tutting, who can't stop himself. Um, there are things that are kind of, you know, mildly clever. I like that the crit cop explains the paradox that once we put this law in place, nobody could criticize it, so we've just kind of been stuck here. Um, but obviously the time wave setup is stupid. I don't buy this society, and I don't know that I need to buy it because obviously it's a ridiculous science fiction premise, but I don't know how it works, and a lot of it seems to be going for sort of silly gags, like the greeter is effeminate, and they
Mm.
imitate him and bounce along. Like, I don't know why that's. I guess it's funny to watch. I mean, I don't know what's being mocked there. It just seems a little weird and off, and I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I think this a lot of this episode feels so out of time. Um, this is the sort of thing I'd have expected from a sitcom, maybe in the early '90s.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of thing of like you say, taking the Mickey out of the PC culture, excessive PC culture. Oh, we can't criticize this, so the engineers are catering, and the catering crew are doing the navigation. Blah blah blah. Like, I know it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be funny, but it never. Like I say, every step of the way, it's sort of like it it's that thing that's not thought through well enough. I mean, like they'll
Mm-hmm.
do things like when they've got the pictures on the walls, these badly crayoned or wax drawn sort of pictures, and there's some bits you think that's funny, but then it's sort of like this is by so and so who's 36 and a half, and I'm like, okay, that's mildly funny, and then you think, okay, that's sort of a bit, and then like I say, but then they'll do it like, okay, the greeter, who I think is supposed, I don't know if he's supposed to be the captain or some whatever he's supposed to be, but he's wearing a
Mm-hmm.
tutu and an elaborate sort of almost like a pantomime dame esque costume,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of they'll sort of like like you say, sort of like it's that stupid joke of walk this way, so they all
Mm.
mimic him. Like, oh, this was a joke from Dad's Army in the '70s, or you know what I mean? It's sort
Yeah,
of
it's a Mel Brooks joke, right?
yeah.
Speaking of which, we I was reminded that the producers did the Hitler thing too back in the '60s. Um, yeah, it's not good to be ripping stuff off from 40 years ago that wasn't especially funny 40 years ago.
No, I mean the greeter or whatever he is reminds me of, and again this might be my brain, but this idea of someone being overly effeminate and everything, it's played for laughs in this
Mm-hmm.
way, and I'm like, it reminds me more of there's a sitcom called Are You Being Served
Mm.
from the '60s and '70s. Um, it was basically one of those British sitcoms littered with sort of like innuendo and sort of homophobia, basically. Um, and there was a character in it. I forget, Mr. One of our listeners will probably know this, but he basically sort of like, he's effeminate and he's sort of like, so are you free? I'm free, and it feels like that. And I'm thinking, right, that didn't age well. This hasn't either.
Yeah, right.
And even when you've got like I say, like Johnny Vegas, who is I find funny. He's not a bad comedian actor, as you say, he's the critic cop and stuff. Like all of that, it just feels like, although it's played for laughs and you got everyone's brightly coloured in pinks and reds and greens and all that other stuff. Like this episode feels like it's got a taint of bitterness to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that it's not just the central premise. I mean, the Crit Cop at one point has a criticism breathalyzer. Okay, I guess that's funny because cops have breathalyzers, and here's the Crit Cop version of that. But that how does that make sense? I mean, it's just like I'm Batman, so I've got a bat phone. It's not funny. There's that whole like escaping from jail thing where Crichton has isotope samples in his arm that combines with a helium-7 from Lister's boot because they were on this moon that Rimmer's named Planet Rimmer. That's one of the decent parts of this whole episode. And so they blow up in the cell and escape and are literally captured inside the cell.
Yeah.
So what was the point of this entire sequence, right? I mean, they literally don't even leave the cell, and that's not played for laughs particularly. I do think of in the climax. The climax has to be the worst part, and I think watching it, I thought, okay, this isn't great. I'm not loving this, but I'm along for the ride. And when we get to after the jailbreak attempt gone wrong, we have this sort of climactic sequence in which this effeminate leader is saying like, well, I'm going to hook you up to the train device. And so there's this device that removes self-criticism, all right, which is literally just wires hanging down from a spotlight. Like in all of this budget, things look a lot better in the recent seasons, but this is not good. There's one funny line about how Rimmer, again, it's amazing how much Rimmer steals the show. Rimmer mentions Yvonne Magruder again and says, I thought clitoris was spit on her wrist, which is a little absurd, but it's funny. And then Rimmer's inner critic overpowers the machine, as this effeminate guy is sort of being played for laughs. And there's this kind of like, inner critic manifesting physically in the room with an R on his face, for no reason. I mean, for Rimmer, it's at this point that I'm just like holding my head in my hands. I kind of go along with it until this point, and then I cannot get over that kind of brain device thing and the inner critic and it being commented on by this kind of effeminate, satire character.
Well, this is it again, because there are two moments in this episode that I like. But this, and I'll get to this in a minute, but this, like I said, this finale again. Talk about repeating ourselves. Like although I love Rimmer, like, and I love all this stuff when they do these explorations and stuff, like, but this is no different to, the Simoon in season 5, where they go, you get Rimmer's there addressing his own monster. And you think, yeah, well, we've already done this,
right?
This
right.
Self-critical. Like, so all right, you couldn't come up with anything better than something. Whilst I enjoy seeing, some of the comments are funny when he talks about sort of like how this self-critic has protected Rimmer from doing all this stuff, and Rimmer has a moment of sort of realization. Okay, that's fine, but we've been here before, and all this other stuff. Even to the extent of what was it in the last series, the medical droid that wasn't a medical droid. And Rimmer giving himself a sort of a psychoanalysis. yeah, that was funnier than this, and it's sort of like, you know, but we keep coming back to this thing, like you can't seem to get away from this. And I honestly think one of the things, and we've sort of talked about it, the problem this is we're now sort of 12 series in, you know, we're what, 30 years hence from the start, and because these characters have grown but not been able to develop, like they keep having to come back to the same character traits to make jokes, and it's starting to wear a little thin in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real shame, and it's just glaringly more than any time it's glaring with this episode finale. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I agree with you. You know, I'm curious about what you think is the other, or you know, these two worst episodes or worst moments in Time Wave.
I know there's two good moments. I like the
Okay.
opening. I like the idea of sort of this idea of
Planet
this
Rimmer.
Planet Rimmer. That bit is quite good. So you know, the fact he's sort of like, I found this moon. It's the most precious element in the universe. And you know, even with this sort of handful of stuff, like I can be, you know, I'm rich and this other stuff. So again, the opening of this episode, I'm quite like, okay, this is quite funny. Like, you know, they're doing some good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of goes off a cliff a little bit. But the other moment is when it's revealed that Crichton does keep collections of dirt and stuff in it, like an arm compartment, and Rimmer's like, "What? Why do you do that?" And Crichton's response is, "Why do you keep collections of wooden soldiers in your locker?" Like, you know, that exchange is like, well, next time, yeah, because obviously the helium-11 and helium-7 and what he's got in his arm is going to create an explosion. It's like, well, next time your sort of, you know, your wooden legionnaires are going to save the day, I'll let you take a lead on this. Like,
Yeah,
I like the fact that like Crichton actually does have a little dig at him, and I that little exchange I really enjoy. But apart from that, like apart from, you know, like I say the beginning bit and that one little moment in the cell, yeah, this episode to me is dire. Like it really bothers me how bad this episode is, and almost to an extent of almost to me almost how offensive this episode sort of
yeah,
veers into.
yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, I would quibble about, like, I like the beginning. I love that he wants to, he dubs it Planet Rimmer, and his sort of like the way he keeps coming back in this episode to sort of not Planet Rimmer, you know, he's so concerned about the stupid moon. But you know, so I like that, even though it's a little over the top, but that works for me. But I do wonder, like, you know, how does he get to name this planet? I guess as the ranking officer. Why are they still obeying that? Why does he think that like he's going to have all this money when we get back to Earth? It's crystal clear they're not getting back to Earth, and even if they did, you know, the money is not going to be worth anything. You know, that kind of stuff seems, you know, the idea that Rimmer is still holding out, because we've long since passed the point where they're talking about getting back to Earth. So I just kind of find that a little weird. I also do hate, I mean, I really, you know, I mentioned like how much I hate the, oh, you know, we're boarding a space station that's about to run into a protoplanet. You know, I really do hate that, and this has that. But I also hate the idea that like a few hours on the ship and they repeal the criticism law. It's like, you know, oh, you know, literally the climax is criticism can be good for us. We've never thought of that before. And then the guy just unilaterally reverses it. Really, that's what our characters, you know, have accomplished. So they are the sort of like messiah characters, but that's kind of intrinsic to some sci-fi plots. But here, it's so paper thin. I mean, the idea that it's never occurred to them that criticism might be positive and result in something positive. Again, maybe it's just the sort of like unthought out, bitter, angry at political correctness or something, which I don't associate with the show. I mean, this is a show that has, I mean, okay, its treatment of women could be better, but it's certainly a show that has minority characters. I mean, you have both Lister and the cat. Um, it's a show that, while not a platform for a liberal agenda in an onerous sort of way, is certainly seems to be sensitive. And this episode just feels like, how is this? What's going on in Naylor? What's going on here?
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I was almost tempted to have a look to see, was there anything going on in the news at the time? Like, was it getting a bad rep or something? But I thought, well, no, because 11 was actually, like you say, 11 received some good, was, as we sort of said, received good reviews and stuff. So I don't know where this has come from, other than maybe, like you say, it was just right, we haven't picked fun at this yet.
Yeah. Got to be fair.
Yeah. And maybe that's it. And maybe, like, because we're saying that, it's maybe the confused satire within it. I mean, some of the bad jokes and sort of, targeting of certain types is poor, but maybe the bad jokes and stuff is because he doesn't really want to have to do this episode. He's like, okay, well, I've got to sort of try something different. And maybe it just doesn't sit well with him, and that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. Like, is this... It didn't occur to me that this was kind of, maybe just a fairness ploy. But, yeah, I mean, there are moments where it seems like his heart isn't really in it. And you could have thought of something better here. You would have if you really cared about doing a biting satire. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it does not work. It's certainly one on the short list of worst Red Dwarf episodes.
Yes, I definitely agree. Yeah, and that's what was interesting to see what you thought of it, because it's just such a, like I say, it's almost like a baffling departure from what they've done before. That I was just like, I don't get where's this going. Yes,
that climax, man. I mean, yeah, that's one of those just sort of like where I hold my head in my hands and I'm just like, okay. I checked the time counter and I'm like, okay, I've got like 6 minutes left. Okay, how bad can it be? We'll get to the next episode.
Well, this is it. I mean, with 3 episodes into the season, and really so far, Siliconia, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, but I'm really not. I've got a bad feeling of what's coming. I'm sort of thinking, oh, this doesn't feel like it's gelling in the way that it has before.
Yeah, and that was frustrating because we both agreed like 11 is good. I mean, 11 is is a strong season and has, I think, a couple just classic episodes. I mean, you have Crisis. There are a couple episodes in 11 that just could stand with any season's strong episodes. So I had the same sort of thing, like, I wanted another season 11 and I'm getting more, and I'm a little, I'm happy with some of it. I'm happy it exists. I'm a Red Dwarf fan. I want more Red Dwarf. Okay. But, this episode is definitely a kind of groaner.
Yeah. And as you say, I think this is in that potential for one of the worst episodes, ever. But we jump forward, because the season continues, and we get Mechaocracy. Another interesting one. So, after a series of events, the crew are about to try and leave Red Dwarf because it's about to explode, and the vending machines alight on the notion that they're not being taken with the rest of the crew and going to be left behind to be destroyed. When the ship isn't destroyed, the vending machines and technical appliances all agree that actually they should have a bit of a say in what's going on the ship, and so go on strike, which leads to an election to have a representative for the technical appliances on the ship. So we get an election episode, which very different. What were your thoughts on this episode?
I like this episode. I don't think that it's a classic, but But it is a very fun idea, and it has some fun stuff. I mean, I think you and I both love. I mean, I like robots generally, but you and I both love the Scudders. I love, all the vending machine stuff. I love any episode that has Scudders and vending machines. And, the Scudders pulling the vending machines on strike is very funny. Rimmer, running against Crichton, in this debate about, in which they get a question about Silicon Heaven. I mean, literally before we did this episode, we were talking about how in America, you've got to make these religious statements to run for office, and here we're seeing the same thing happen on the ship with robots in Silicon Heaven. So, I mean, there's a lot of good fun here.
Yeah, I think when Rimmer has that sort of live debate and he sort of says, well, I believe whatever you believe. It's the way he does it. I think it's very topical. I mean, this was 2016. I think this came out. No, this was. I have to check now. 2018, maybe actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoy this episode. It was 2017. This came out. So I can see this.
Trump.
Yeah, but I can see this being written during that campaign and during that election and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I do like the meaning that we get Talkie Toaster back, which is good. But I just like I do like the idea on this that actually, this because the 4 crew don't really do a great deal, and so they are sort of reliant on this sort of the artificial intelligence machines on the ship, and they do take them for granted. So it's there is some good stuff in this. I mean, I like the fact that it's going to rely on going for the dirty tricks. Of course, Lister's trying to rake mud on the things, and Rimmer, I like the fact that Rimmer does the campaign video of sort of, and they do mention stuff. They rake up stuff from the past. It's in fact, and they respond. So there's those 2 sort of like mud raking campaign ads, which I think are very funny.
Yeah, I agree, and I love the iconography of the posters and seeing Scudders driving past posters for this campaign. It's over the top, but it's so wonderful.
It is. There's a lot of fun, and again, sort of, again, it's sort of quite a Crichton-centric episode and stuff, and I like, just the notion of sort of Crichton having to step up, and it makes sense for him to be the sort of like the leader. But the moment when it's happening, and he comes in, he's like, "Look, I've spoken to the machines, and they've said they would like a representative to for their point of view in decisions being made on the ship. Someone who can voice, who has the voice of the mechs." And Rimmer's like, "Well, it's going to be me." And Crichton says, "But sir, I am a mechanoid." Like, it's sort of like any chance for power, Rimmer's going to. Even flying in the face of like logic, it's like it makes no sense for him to step up against Crichton. But damned if he's not going to try to just have a little bit of power.
No, I love that too. And I like. I mean, in a way, it does make sense because Rimmer is artificial. I mean, he's got his holo projector, and he's not alive. And Crichton gets to this point later where he says, "Oh, I've bitten off more than I can chew," where Crichton says, "But I'm not equal. I don't see myself as equal." So in a way, Crichton is the worst representative for machine rights because he believes in machine subservience.
That's a really, but yes, he was always supposed to be giving in, wouldn't he? It's again like a step up from having come from Time Wave to this. Like this has got so many good moments in it. And again, I like the moment when they're like, "Look, there's a swing vote. There's only one vote we've got to get to win this." And so they have.
Yeah, go ahead.
and they have to go visit Talkie Toaster, and
Yeah.
Lister having to give in to him. It's sort of negotiating, like, I've got to be the living quarters, and he goes off and sort of like, right, I want you to have 9 rounds of toast and a crumpet, and this is I'm not eating all that toast, no, not doing it, and has to keep sort of like whittling him down. I do enjoy that scene. That's really good.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. I did think that it has a little bit of the sort of like fans, it's fan service, right? It's like, we want to see Talkie Toaster again. I want to see Talkie Toaster again. It's a little silly and absurd that it comes down to him, and then what are you going to do with Talkie Toaster but have toast discussions, right? So I mean, I like the negotiation, but I do think by the end, where the sort of end is Rimmer sealed in the garbage hole, just saying no toast to Talkie Toaster. At that point, it's over the top. We got it. It's fun to see Talkie Toaster again, but a little goes a long way.
Yeah, it's that if it had just been kept to that one scene, and the fact of the matter is, Crichton wins and doesn't. That the point to note is, Crichton wins, but then doesn't actually hold up his election promise because Torquay's still in the hold.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they've totally and there's no result from this, right? I mean, Crichton wins, but it's not like he said, like from now on, every time they leave Red Dwarf, they're going to take the vending machines.
Yeah. It's one of those sort of, it's a fun episode. It's never going to come up again. Never going to be mentioned again. It does sort of get left behind. But I do enjoy the sort of like the idea of it. And like I said, because it's one of the things that Red Dwarf has tapped into on many occasions has been the notion of a power dynamic and levels of authority. So even in deep space, they keep sort of falling into these sort of norms of I see like political parties and all this other stuff. Like these notions always keep coming up again and again. So
right, they seem kind of like clinging to them, kind of.
Yes.
So I do have an important question for you. I mean, do you believe that deleting documents is murder?
Yeah. At what point is it? At what point is a file a document?
Right.
Yeah.
That's very, very. I mean, it's very silly, but it's very funny.
Yeah, and again, we've said about having things haven't been thought through. This is where some of the jokes of the wit and the jokes are really good, because that is a great when they're doing that debate. That question, like and Rimmer sort of saying, when is a document a file? When's a file a document? And when's it okay to sort of get rid of it? Is very political, and you could take that, and I could imagine that being a sort of like it is that sort of like, was it the I suppose it's the equivalent of like the abortion kind of thing, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it's very silly, right? Because you have to delete documents. I mean, Crichton is deleting memories all the time, right? Obviously, it's inconceivable that this would really be done, but I do love the sort of like ridiculousness of like asking robot political candidates, when does a document, if we believe that we have sentience, when does a document have sentience? And then this gets you into kind of like problems of where does consciousness reside? I mean, if you delete a human being's memory, are you deleting a part of a human being? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly problematic in terms of the logistical working in the universe, but I do love the abortion question, for robots.
Yeah. And this is where I think, like I say, the writing is really solid in this episode. And some of the ideas. I mean, there's even sort of like subplots going on that are quite good. Like it turns out that Cat is actually, his vision has been impaired for a long time by the sound of it, and then he finds a pair of glasses, and just by putting them on, he's like, "Oh man, all this stuff I can see, I can read," and he gets blackmailed into helping Rimmer on the election campaign, and then later has to make a choice. It turns out he's learning things
Yeah.
by reading. Um, and Lister sort of poses the question. It's like, well, look, you've got a choice here. You can sort of keep learning and develop and expand as a person, or you can ignore this issue you've got with your vision and just get rid of the glasses and try and be cool for as long as possible. And instantly you just see the glasses getting shredded in a blender. So we know where Cat sort of like sits on it. But again, it's sort of like, it's an interesting concept, this idea of could there be more to the cat? And they just keep teasing these ideas, but it's not really explored. But again, I quite like that as a subplot.
Yeah, I do too. I was going to ask what you thought about that.
Mm.
I think it's fascinating. It doesn't really go anywhere. I was a little disturbed at the idea that, in 2018, that glasses aren't cool. I mean, glasses are seen as fashionable. I don't know, and the idea that like reading isn't cool, like, okay, all right, are we in Greece now? I was a little bothered by that, but I do love that plot, and I like the idea that Cat could be something more. And I also like any indication, and we get a little bit more of this as time goes on, but I like any kind of like recognition that the crew's getting older.
Mm.
That's one of the things that I really dig about like Star Trek 2. You have to acknowledge time is passing. You have to acknowledge that your cast is getting older.
Yeah, and especially the cat who is so narcissistic and sort of shallow. It's almost more important to acknowledge him getting older than some of the others. But again, like, it's one of those things where some minor tweaks could have helped this sort of story. Because the glasses are very plain; they're just some plain black rimmed sort of glasses. But they're not, they're not particularly stylish or anything. But they're not hideous. But this could have easily, I think, been remedied if they were to acknowledge that the glasses they found were the only pair of glasses. Ignore the fact that Eddie Bay that could do pretty much anything by the sound of it. But so I don't know why he's not having laser eye surgery. But if they were to be some sort of elaborate Elton John kind of glasses or Dame Edna Everett glasses, now look, but these are the only glasses on the ship, and they're helping you see. And he's got to make the choice then between, because then it's like, actually, it's not the reading that's uncool, it's the fact that you are lumbered with these glasses.
Well, I mean, you could even have a bit where they're sort of like doing the glasses up, in a cooler way, and trying to get Cat to decide to keep them. Like, this is important. This is good for you. Like Lister's helped Crichton grow so much, but Lister doesn't seem to have the same commitment to the cat here. I mean, he knows now that the cat could be greater, but he's perfectly content to let him stay a cat.
Yeah. So there are, it's one of those again where if they were to tweak it a little bit, I think it would be a little stronger. But it is good. I do like it, and I like his response to it at the end, where he's sort of like, again, it goes back to that thing of like the cat's just sort of like, no, I'm happy just being me, and I'm going to crack on with life, sort of thing.
Yeah, and as far as like stuff that could be eliminated, we have the same problem here, that we had in Siliconia, where we have this kind of setup at the beginning, where we have this like SOS virus that, there's so much time spent with sort of berating Lister for just, it's a cool idea of there's, an SOS beacon. It's actually a virus. So you've got to quarantine like a beacon, a message, which we've never seen before and we'll never see again. But it's kind of a cool idea. But they spend a lot of time with that in order to get them to have to leave the ship, which they ultimately don't have to do. All of that is just to see that the vending machines aren't going to go with them, which of course the vending machines have seen before. We've seen, they've evacuated the ship 1 million times, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, this thing of having to tack on these introductory, these intro segments, it's not a massive issue. Good thing is, but I mean, I think back to I'm trying to think of the episodes. I'm pretty sure Whitehole, and there's an earlier one as well in season 3 or 4 where it literally opens with Crichton, Lister, and Rimmer at a console, sort of like tapping away, and Lister Rimmer providing information, and the cat comes in and sort of unplugs the console to do his unsightly leg hair remover or whatever, and it's like there's been no intro. It's just like, oh no, you are opening the episode in the moment of crisis. Like they're literally getting coming to this, and then they'll crack on with the episode after that. They'll move on and go, okay, let's this is the situation. Right, here's the funny. But with this series, they seem to have this sort of determination to be like, no, we're going to have a middle, beginning, and an end. I'm going to tell a full arc. And you're like, yeah, but in doing so, you're having to compress it into 23, 24 minutes, and it's just not breathing, or you're having to sort of, like you said, if this episode opened literally with them leaving the ship, and you had some brief dialogue explaining why, you'd even have the joke. I mean, I'm sure they've done it before, where there's just a joke. When they lost Red Dwarf,
right?
They literally had the sort of thing of like, they palm it off in like 2 minutes with a joke about Lister losing it because he fell asleep at the console or whatever, or he was drunk or whatever. Like, they've done it before where they've just sort of like, it's been a sort of dropped line or some exposition in brief, humorous dialogue, and then they move on. But this series is determined to be like, here's the event that sort of instigates the entire plot. It's going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll get this, and then I won't really resolve anything because I've run out of time. I don't know. It just sort of, I really like Mechaocracy. I think has got some really good stuff in it, and I really enjoy some bits of it. But you're right. This season is determined to try and, I don't know whether it's trying to do something different or it's just not being as tight as it should be.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's trying to do something different. I mean, I feel like, obviously the sort of season 6, 7, and 8 are not as well loved, but at this point we've sort of done a soft reboot of the series, and at this point we are in our third full series plus a 3-part movie into this sort of reboot, and it feels like, okay, we've done that. We all enjoyed that. We were all happy to see Red Dwarf back. We didn't want Red Dwarf to come back with, Kachansky and only on Starbug. We wanted the original formula. We got the original formula. It's had ups and downs. And at this point, I'm starting to feel like, all right, we're 3.5 series in. Maybe we need to start screwing with that formula again.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I don't want to say it feels tired, but it's the repetition and sort of this. I don't know. It feels a little creaky at this point, I suppose, is the way to put it, for me at least.
Yeah. No. Well, I think, and for me, this is not a great season, and this sort of pattern continues, where, for me, you get a sort of weak first episode and a good second episode. Not a stunning, great episode, but a solid, strong episode. Then you get a really weak episode, and then you get a solid, strong episode. And now we're going into M Corp, which I think is, like those other weak episodes, a good idea, but poor execution. I like the idea, but man, it is not great.
No, MCOR is another one, isn't it? I mean, the general gist of the of the episode is we find out that the Jupiter Mining Corps has been taken over by a new corporation called MCOR, and they are basically going to insert themselves into the ship and into the way the ship is run, to the extent that anything that is non-MCOR or formerly Jupiter Mining Corps is removed. This sort of leaves Lister isolated, while the rest try to sort of figure out how to get him back. And again, like this episode, like you say, has got some really interesting ideas, but yeah, it's also got some. It's just got some moments. Like it never rises beyond a smirk.
That's
on
a good
on
way
a
of
humor
putting
level.
it.
Yeah,
Well, and
there's
also,
a
the satire is just kind of smirky, right? Like, I mean, I think of obviously this is done kind of post Mr. Robot, right, which had E Core, and here is M Core, and obviously it's a kind of take on present day capitalism. I mean, I love the M Core video of like we're going to make your life better, and
yeah.
it's a very kind of like post Apple, post Google, post Amazon, and really post Mr. Robot, sort of take on beautiful, convenient, but ultimately malicious subscription model based capitalism. That should work. And it just doesn't. It doesn't. It's nice to. It feels like very much like a kind of unremarkable Doctor Who episode. You have the perception filter, right, where we're going to filter out your ability to see non M Corp stuff, and ultimately they have to go rescue Dave. I don't know.
No, I think it's yeah, you're right. I mean, it has flashes of where you go, oh, that's a really good idea, that, and then never really gets beyond it. It also has some good effects. I mean, there's some nice moments in this, and some, it sounds daft, but some good mime. I mean, when the M Core first is introduced to the ship, and certain things start to disappear. There's a great moment where Lister goes to the fridge next to his bunk to retrieve a lager, and it's not there, or at least he can't see it because he's now opened the M Core lager, so he can see the M Core lager, but he can't see the old lager. And he says to the cat, like, "What you done with it? Where's my beer?" And he's like, "It's right there, buddy. I can see it." And he takes it out, and but like he's holding it, and he's like, "I can't see. Like, I can't see. I can see this, but I can't see that." You basically, you're taking the mick. There's nothing there. So to prove a point, Cat shakes it and says, "Well, if I shake this and pull it open, so nothing's going to happen." He's like, "No, it can't. There's nothing there." And he pulls it, and the way they've done it, like, it's a physical. It's not hugely complicated, but as a physical effect, like he pulls it open, and Lister is sprayed with beer coming from a can that's not there. But then Danny John Jules obviously sort of like mimes drinking from the can and stuff, and it's just very well done. And there's a couple of moments like that, in this, where the timing and the crew are very good. Like they're later on, they are muted one by one, and the cast in this are good, and there are some moments when they sort of do shine and do show what they're capable of. But overall, it's just a very sort of like kind of episode. Like the resolution at the end of it, I'm not bothered by.
Yeah, I am. I mean, well, I mean, continue on the mime point. Lister is quite good. Like, there's this whole thing with the invisible toothbrush, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that stuff is good. Tripping over the invisible bed. I mean, that's fine. But yeah, I don't know. To me, it's already kind of lackluster. Like, I really want to like this episode. I like the ideas of this episode. But then, this sort of like M Corp computer program woman starts charging for everything and gets to the point where like it's creating fires just to charge Lister for a fire extinguisher. And it seems like, okay, this is not the program you're operating on every spaceship in the former Jupiter mining core, right? Which, by the way, is going to be JMC in the next episode, right?
Yeah.
But so I just think like, okay, this is just getting a little over the top. And then out of nowhere, the M Corp, woman / computer program says, "Oh, well, you're out of credits, so now I'm going to charge you time." And then everything that Lister gets is now makes him age. Okay, how the fuck does this work? I mean,
Yeah.
this is so stupid. And then when we see Lister and he's rescued, he's just like he's an old man. He's perfectly content. He's just like, I'm gonna enjoy this bliss in the few minutes I have left, I guess. I don't understand what's happened there either. Then they de-age Lister, and they want to reinstall Lister. I mean, I guess that's what, I'm not that bothered by that, but, it doesn't make sense either. I don't understand why Lister de-ages.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, no, I think that you're right about this sort of the M core intelligence, the artificial intelligence for it, because obviously it's a little bit of a dig of like Siri or Alexa and that sort of thing. But if you were to have a subscription service where you have to pay for everything, that's fine. If you go broke, you don't get it. But surely charging people in time, like literally taking time off their life so they age or whatever, that's a really bad business model. Because you're sort of like, within a week, like everyone's like 90 and dead, and you've got no customers. Like again, it's like you said, it's one of those ideas in this series that's just not been thought through properly. Like yeah.
Well, there was that movie, right, where they pay for things in time and they have those counters and, like on their wrist, they have these wrist watches.
But that works both ways. Like you could literally add like time to your life. That's never mentioned in this. Like if it was to be turned round of like, oh, I mean, again, simple solution, because it's disconnected from Earth, because they're, 3 million years in deep space, apparently. The M core intelligence couldn't bank Lister's time, so it's had to save it locally. So we'll reinstall that time that had to be saved locally into Lister. Boom. That could have been solved. Because then this idea is actually this time is a physical thing that actually you could add to somebody else. Because then you can create credit and you can that. If it was to explain that, I would have been happy with that. But none of that's there you go. That idea is just never broached.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. And, I mean, along the lines of the complaint that, this is a bad business model, I thought, who's benefiting from this? There's no implication that you're extracting time in some mumbo jumbo physical form, which I'd be fine with. You can plug it back into Lister. That's a great solution. But so what are you getting out of charging time? And it's just thrown in there as a one-liner and becomes so important to the plot. I don't know. I really am. I mean, it's a bit like the climax of Time Wave, where you kind of get to this point and you think like, well, okay, I'm along for the ride. It's Red Dwarf. Bad Red Dwarf is still better than the lows of other shows. I'm along for the ride. And then, I'm thinking like, this is a good idea. I mean, you could write a good script of Time Wave, of the sort of, you could write a good script of Cured. I mean, I want to see the M Corp kind of, play up that satire, have a smart idea. And then you get to this climax where, just like you have this ridiculous machine in Time Wave where suddenly the Siri, as you pointed out, starts charging time. And from then on, I'm just like, okay. I mean, the train has hopped the tracks for me at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And again, they sort of, it's the fact that Lister gives into it as well bothers me more than anything. I mean, they suggest, when it hurts him in order to him to buy painkillers and water and all that other stuff. And then it sets the thing on fire, so he has to get a fire extinguisher. And you're sort of like, okay, that's malicious and doesn't really make a great deal of sense. And then it introduces a friend for him to have, and that sort of, and it bounces back to the Red Dwarf. And when the crew finally catch up to him and they're able to enter this sort of MCOR world, and he's got lots of friends there, he's clearly paid for more. He's surrounded by all this stuff. And I know it's supposed to be a comment on, how we do give in to the sort of like the ease of things, whether it be Amazon or streaming services or whatever. Fine. But that, again, like, why has Lister given in to buying all this crap? Because I know he's supposed to be suffering from some form of isolation, but it's still, even that doesn't feel like in character. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like he's given up the fight.
Right.
Well, how long? Yes, he's been giving up time, but he hasn't been there years.
Right.
He's been there a couple of hours.
Right, and he's completely given way. I mean, my objection to it is that it happens off screen, right? Now, maybe there was a scene where you have him say, well, there's nothing left to do but, like, join the capitalist consumer hordes, which, as you say, seems really antithetical to Lister.
Yeah.
But to cut back to the regular crew, as Lister is passionately resisting, desperately, but yes, resisting, you cut back to the rest of the crew. They go in to rescue him, and they just find him already having utterly submitted. That just seems like such a rift, not only for Dave's character, but also for the story that we've been following, where it's a story of resistance. And, you could have done that scene of him submitting, as you say, as a sort of social commentary, and it could have been interesting. I mean, it could be 60 seconds. That's fine. But to just find him like that just feels incongruous.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of been the sort of theme of this series, is it's been things just seem slightly bolted together for either a joke or to wrap things up. Because that is the solution of Encore. Like, they literally just find him, they pull him out, and then they rejuvenate him in whatever way. And even the resolution of how they defeat the bloody Siri, Crichton's like, well, you can buy me anything, so you can provide me with anything. I want a virus that will wipe you out. Well, no, because we've seen that this artificial intelligence has actually had, has had some. Firstly, it's got a level of awareness and a level of intelligence, because it's actually it's proactively hurt and threatened Lister in order for him to spend money. So, why would it give up such a thing straight away? It's such a simple sort of solution of going, and again, it's that sort of, it's the annoying thing of Crichton comes in and says, well, of course, the logical thing is for me to provide a virus for it that will do this. And you go, well, would it not be more threatening if it said no?
Right. No, I was bothered by that too. I mean, I agree.
Surely as the manufacturer, you'd be like, right, here's the things we want to put in place, the procedures and protocols we want to put in place that prevent this from happening. Like,
right.
It won't give out things that could damage its software.
Yeah, I mean, can you buy a nuclear weapon?
Yeah. No, yeah. Could I go on Amazon and go, right, I want to buy, enough to hack into Jeff Bezos' email account, please?
Because it's the everything store. You can buy everything.
Yeah. The ending of this, again, it's so quick. It's so, it's too quick, too neat. And it bothers me. It really does.
Well, if somebody is suicidal on an M Corp ship, they can just go into debt because they don't care about their own time, which I don't understand. But they could spend their own time to buy a bomb that blows up the entire ship. Every single personnel member can do that.
Yeah, apparently so. There's no permissions or anything granted. I mean, all right, I work with deploying software for, in projects for companies, and giving people security levels and security level of access and profile access is
Mm-hmm.
sort of like big part. Even when you're doing stuff online, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like what level of access are you going to be granted? Are you going to have your bronze level or your platinum level, sort of thing? This whole thing just feels again a bit like we had this idea and we're going to sort of see it through, but we're not really going to give it the sort of. It's almost like I don't know, something about this series, because each episode is sort of driven more by an idea rather than just sort of like sitcom comedy. Is that, to me, this sort of feels a bit more like it's trying to compete with something like Black Mirror
Uh-huh.
than another sitcom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it does have kind of especially with a sort of white area that Lister's in. I mean, we've seen those before in Red Dwarf. For uh, anytime the show wants to depict like a beautiful version of Red Dwarf or a
Yeah.
utopian place, it's all very white and brightly lit. But that area here is not a good place, even superficially, and does feel very Black Mirror.
Hmm. But even I think even the points, every episode in this series has been driven by a
Uh,
a commentary idea. You know,
like
everything
a
from
cultural critique.
everything. You know,
Yeah.
Cured is about whether evil has a place in society and what is to be evil. Siliconia is about sort of the class system and what it is to be sort of to be really free and to be to be equal. You got Time Wave about criticism and the
Hmm.
PC culture. Then you get democracy and the corruption of the campaigning, and then you've got this about big corporations. Like when you go back, like where's the episodes? Like Back to Reality was one of the best episodes. No real agenda. It's just an idea that, like, yeah, you might be in a different reality, and that has an impact on the crew. We've seemed to have left the crew dynamic and gone into this
Mm.
thing of like they're now looking at trying to make a comment on things, and it's not working in this series.
I think that's really insightful, man. Yeah, I mean, I agree. That sort of crew dynamic is lost. The sort of, I don't know. I love plot. I'm a plot guy, but
Mm.
you're right that I mean, this is a show that you can forgive quick plot elements if the characters are working and if the comedy is working. Um, you know, the only thing I'd add to that is it's not really following through on those ideas, right?
Mm.
It's a kind of gesturing towards those ideas. So just like the sort of like PC station is not really thought out, right? Um, Here, this is not really thought out. I mean, we were told that M Corp bought Earth, right? So now,
Yeah.
apparently, in continuity, Earth belongs to M Corp. Never going to be mentioned again, right?
Yeah.
But they own Earth, and they started taxing thinking. Okay, how
Mm.
did that work? I know it's like it's there to, haha, make a joke about how you don't have time to criticize the corporate culture. It's also there to kind of be ironic, just like in Time Wave. Again, just 2 episodes prior, where there's this irony of like once you implement the idea that you can't criticize that. So once you tax thinking, you cannot let people won't be able to spend the money to think about how this is a bad idea. I get it. I mean, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know how you
No.
do that. And for me it's those kinds of like I like the sci-fi stuff of Red Dwarf. I mean, I can go along with something that isn't even true to the characters if I think that it's kind of fun and clever and it might not be my favorite episode, but this just is not clever. And I cannot forgive I mean, for me, the jumping the shark moment is just, well, since you're out of credits, I'm now going to charge you in time. Are you fucking kidding me?
Mm.
I don't know.
No, I agree. It just there are ways of doing these ideas better, and I think it just feels tired. I mean, I'm looking back at some of my favorite episodes from the series on my list, You know, and you know, there are some really good ideas in these, but a lot of them are crew focused.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to this one, you know, I mean, even look back at even to the last series. The episode we referred to the most is Crisis. You know,
Right.
Crichton going through the midlife crisis, and there are moments in that episode that are incredibly silly, but it's really sort of got some. It's got some really good, you know, relatively sort of like, you know, heartfelt moments that are, you know, that are hilarious when he's sort of like, you know, when he's trying to sort of outdo Butler and all this other stuff. But it's character driven. It's based in those. None of this has ever been character driven. I mean, the one that
Yeah.
comes closest is probably Siliconia.
Right.
But then in that, like, you know, even even in that, like it gets pulled into sort of the wider story rather than focusing in on, you know, yes, you get the dilemma of, say, like, you know, Rimmer, the cat, and Lister, but you know, there could have been so much more to explore with Crichton. You know, when you look back at some of the previous episodes, going all the way back to Last Day, um, you know, and this idea of Silicon Heaven, of having a sort of an expiry date, and all these other bits and pieces. You know, that could have been a classic. That could have been the Crichton episode, and you know, it seems like it wants to sort of answer these other questions, and I just think that's a real shame, and it comes through the rest as well.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Um, you know, and I think you're right. I mean, I hate to admit it as a kind of plot guy, and you know, and you know, I guess Naylor was the, you know, is the more sci-fi focused of Grant and Naylor. That
Mm.
um, you know, and I love that sci-fi stuff. I love how especially those early episodes work both as a great sci-fi episode and as funny. um you know, and some of them are more silly than funny, but I mean, you know, you're right about character. You know, I think you're right about all of this. What do you make about the resolution of sort of reinstalling Lister using Chippy, which you've been introduced to at the beginning as this kind of like nano device that you know, is going to repair Dave?
Yeah, the fact I'd pretty much forgotten about that is shows really what I thought about it. Again, it's sort of like it's a bookend device that I don't think is needed. Like, there are better, like I sort of said, there are better ways of doing this. Um, Again, I remember the start episode, like, you know, Chippy dies because he mistakenly sort of he judged his own, you know, death time rather than Lister's and all this other stuff. Again, it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's not strong. And if anything, again, like in the last series, we had a bloody talking face Medicomputer
Uh-huh.
um, that appears to have disappeared. Um,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a again though. This idea of talking to something that's inside Lister. Well, we've already done that in Series
Right.
7.
Right, with the
So
virus.
yeah, and it was
Yeah.
done better then.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's touching things. It's touching on things it's already done before, and it's just not hitting any high notes for me at the moment.
Yeah, and it does sort of follow this up and down pattern of you know, nothing. I don't think Siliconia or Mechocracy have been great. Neither of them have
Mm,
been classic. They have been the two that I've liked, but
mm.
it is a bummer to have every other episode be, you know, one that I'm not enjoying.
Yeah, but we know we're coming to the last episode. We're coming to Skipper, the last episode in this series, and I mean the nub of this one really is the end. I mean this you know
Hmm.
the whole point of this episode is the last like 4 or 5 minutes of it. I don't know how long it is, but they basically have a device that allows them to skip through reality, and Rimmer takes it then to visit other versions of reality to find one where he can fit in best, and eventually ends up coming back to the normal the Red Dwarf that we know.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Rimmer going through alternate dimensions, been there before. But what are your thoughts on Skipper?
I think this is slightly, not by a whole lot, but I think this is slightly the best episode of the season. I like it. Siliconia, I think I like more than Mechocracy. I think I like this a little more than Siliconia. None of them are great. I do like, in the setup, the idea that they, there's this kind of, the multiple worlds hypothesis of, every choice creates another parallel universe. I mean, this is a silly idea, but, essentially Crichton has been testing this device, which seems a little out of character for him. And this device has somehow malfunctioned. And so now you are going to the universe, or you continue in the universe in which that continues from the choice you didn't make. Now there's so that's kind of fun. I mean, I do like Cat's inability to control himself. I don't think that it really works because I mind. I always keep thinking, like, do they really decide to do what they don't want to do? Like, we're not going to go into this room. Okay, well, how does this work, right? I mean, do you just announce that you're not going to do it, or have you really made a decision to not doing it? If you know that decision will result in the opposite effect, have you really made that decision?
The thing that really annoyed me with this, about this whole section of the you end up doing the outcome of the decision you don't make, or whatever, if that's right, it also becomes a time jump. It's not just that you do it, like you jump to the result.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, so Lister sort of plays it off on Cat. He's like, go make my breakfast. I'm not going to make your breakfast. The next thing you see, he's sort of frying up his breakfast and stuff. And then he's like, then they do it later, like, polish my shoes. I'm not going to polish your shoes, monkey. And then all of a sudden he's polishing his shoes. And it's like, oh no, it's not just that you have to act, because the other then sort of like, they make the breakfast or whatever, and Lister's like, oh, I'm not going to eat this, and then starts forcing it in his face. I'm like, well, how come this one hasn't jumped forward to you sitting there with an empty plate, feeling incredibly sick? So is it a time jump as well, or is it that you have to act these things out? I don't know what it is you're supposed to. What is the result? Because again, like, they jump up and down the bloody ship as well, don't they? Sort of like, we're not going to take the stairs. Oh, we're going to jump to and it throws them around in time and space a little bit, and again, it's just inconsistent.
No, you're completely right, and I would have been more charmed by. I mean, I guess the problem is, once you've decided to not do something, but you really want to do the opposite, there's this weird thing that's happening with volition, right? That if you are now going to do the opposite of what you want to do, you don't control your body, right? You're not able to make that choice. And that could be funny, like you pointed out, with eating what you don't want to eat. The irony here is that these actors are perfectly capable of, like, stomping through Red Dwarf, saying to each other, like, I don't want to go down the stairs, and that would have been great fun to see, but it's as if that, hasn't been thought of.
Yeah, I agree, because again, they've done stuff to this, similar to this before, even just the even as silly as like the boots in Justice that sort of make them stomp around. But it's this thing, isn't it, of saying, right, don't think about elephants.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, you cannot think about elephants. If you were to think about elephants right now, then everything is going to be gone. Well, that's it then. You can't help but think about elephants. Like, it's that same thing. Saying, all right, I'm choosing to get up and open that door. Well, just choosing to do it, surely you've then got to try and follow it up with a physical action, because that shows that you're engaged with that thought. And again, like you say, so it just feels, it's a story device to facilitate a couple of jokes. And unfortunately, again, the jokes aren't aren't landing. There's a couple of moments, like you said, the bit where the cat can't control himself, and every time they go for this, they say they're not going to take the lift, and he keeps going to press the button because it's just reflex. And I like that idea that it's just reflex. I didn't think, I just did it. It's just, it's just, we always do that.
Well, also that it's cat, right?
Yeah. But other than that, like, it just, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I will say I do like how they immediately began manipulating each other.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Lister's like, I can make cat shine my boots. I can make cat cook for me. Just by manipulating the other person into declaring that they're not going to do something forces them to do it. I do like, there's a kind of misanthropic aspect of that feels dead on for Red Dwarf. But I do agree, like, essentially this whole first half of the episode with this conceit of following down the choice you didn't make is a good idea that up until the end of that resolution of that half is sort of like another good idea in this series that could have been great, but that wasn't really thought through.
Yeah.
And another reason why I think it's not thought through, and does continue into the second half, is I wonder, like, so if you make a decision, and then the idea is that, the theory, right? I mean, I have problems with this, but the theory is that every decision somebody makes splinters off the timeline into two different universes. But there's somebody in both universes, right? I mean, there's a copy of you in both of those timelines. One made decision A, one made decision B. So they seem to be, it seems as if the episode does not know that.
Yeah.
And it's like they are being transported into the universe where they made the opposite decision. Well, what happened to the you in that universe? Did they then transport into the other universe? No, it becomes pretty clear in the back half of this episode. Those are just universes in which, like, I guess you've replaced that other person. I don't know.
I almost took it almost like at one point I was trying to think, is it almost like a quantum leap kind of scenario? Like a Sam Beckett kind of way. Like, yeah, our Rimmer's consciousness is leaping from version to version. But then the other thing is, he is physically taking the skipper with him. So I'm sort of fine with that. But yeah, like I say, it doesn't quite follow. Again, it's just it's playful. There's some bits of these are funny, but the whole sort of skipping from dimension to dimension, there's a book called The Long Earth that was written by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter, and it follows this idea of we are sort of what they call the central Earth, and going off from that, there's all these multiple worlds, all right? But we are the only one that's populated. We're the only one that's got this central Earth is the only one that's got life on it, and then beyond that, there's all these different versions of Earth, and they've all got life on them in some capacity. Now, spoilers for the story, but at one point you can jump from one Earth to the next, and there's a voyage going from all across all these Earths, and they're going like tens of thousands of worlds. But then at one point, there's a strangeness going on, and they actually come across a gap where Earth just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like in that reality, Earth doesn't exist, and so they get trapped in the sort of like the coldness of space and have to leap backwards, and then they sort of figure out how to do it. But in this, I was wondering, like, what happens? Could he leap into a universe where he doesn't exist?
Right.
What would happen then? And so,
well, it depends on what's going on, right? Like, you're kind of supposing this quantum leap thing. I mean, and that makes sense. There was the recent episode of Rick and Morty where Rick gives a device to Morty that allows Morty to skip backwards to a preset point. And again, spoilers, at the end of the episode, you find out that, yeah, this has not actually been making Morty go back in time, but in fact, he's going into another quantum universe, and the device is murdering the Morty of that universe, and he's replacing it. And I kept thinking, what's happening to the Rimmer of these universes? Is that Rimmer somehow dying or being displaced?
I don't know, because he takes on a different physical form in these different universes. Like, in ones he comes across these, some he is a hologram, in some he is alive, in one he's an artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So yeah,
right.
does he replace them? Does he? I don't know. So
no, that's right. I mean, that's completely correct. He has to be kind of possessing them somehow. Which is, but then if that's true, why is his unconscious body not left in the original universe?
Yeah, that was what was bothering me. Like, he leaves our reality, or the dwarf reality, and then, like I say, and comes back at the end with a physical appearance. So yeah, again, it could, you said about Doug Naylor likes these sci-fi ideas. And again, it's almost like, but he wants to go out and then do these things, but it would be even more fascinating if that was literally what it was. When Crichton was like, do you know what, actually, we could just install your from your hollow drive, we can install your consciousness onto this skipper, and you can skip through all these, you can quantum skip through all these realities as much as you want. And then it goes wrong and he comes back. That would just solve it, because he's like, it's just your consciousness that's going to skip through these realities. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think you're supposed to sort of think about it as deeply as we do. But
yeah, well, but I mean, I love your hypothetical solutions to these plot problems. I think they're always very simple and very smart. I would add that some of the best episodes are episodes where the implications of a technology are explored. And to me, that is the sci-fi stuff that I like, where, you have a technology and you say, okay, well, what are the implications of this? How would this really work, right? What would this mean? Does this mean that, he's possessing these other Rimmers, that we're somehow able to replace them? I mean, by the way, that would also solve another problem, which is, why does Rimmer go? Why does the rest of the crew is just like, hey, you're leaving. Here, take this awesome device that allows us to skip realities. No problem, Arnold, who we all hate. Let's just give you this device. There's no farewell. I mean, it's very abbreviated of like, oh, I guess I'll never see you guys again. Bye. It's very quick. But why do they give him that? Well, in your construction, then Rimmer's the only one who they can do it with because he's a hologram. But just like this sort of like earlier doing what they decide not to do, what I like about, I think the best episodes, I won't say it's what I like about Red Dwarf, but the best episodes are episodes that take an idea like that and then follow through on the implications. And those implications might be, you're going backwards. How do you poop? Right? You can have fun with those implications, but it's not like the central conceit is just forgotten. Forget it. Let's watch this silly antics.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've just checked IMDb. This is the highest rated episode in the series by quite some distance. And I think it's fine. It makes me chuckle. There are moments in this episode that I do quite like. And I like some of this stuff at the end when he does skip through these other realities. I enjoy watching Chris Barry. Let's just basically put it that. I think he's good in this. But it is good when he finally does get to a reality where he finds out that he is not only is he alive, he's a navigation officer, and he seems to have respect. Like, people, he's achieved everything he wants. He's like, yes, this is it. And I like the fact that the only downfall to this entire thing, like, he could just sort of, before he reveal it, he could just turn the other cheek and be like, do you know what? I'm going to let that one go. and I'm going to live my life because I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. And I'm doing well. But he finds out that Lister has become the captain of Red Dwarf.
Right.
And you sort of find out that basically, but he's still basically a bit of a bum. Like he seems to have sort of like failed upwards in some respects. But yeah, he can't let that go. And I find that whole scene actually quite that's funny.
Oh yeah. But it's also the character driven stuff that you were talking about. I mean, and maybe this is part of why I like this episode best. That, I mean, yeah, the idea is that Lister found the faulty drive plate that killed the crew, right?
Yeah.
And then Lister opted for shares of the Jupiter Mining Corp, and then got rich off those shares. So Rimmer is married. I mean, he's alive. He's got everything he wanted, but that resentment. He just cannot live in a universe in which he'll throw it all away rather than live in a universe in which Lister is more successful than him. No, that does seem, maybe a little over the top, but so dead on for Rimmer. It seems right.
Oh yeah, no, I agree, and I even like the fact again. It goes back to that nostalgia, that sort of the fan service of it all. But the bunk area has changed quite dramatically at this point, and the fact of the matter is they're on a ship that's sort of 3 miles wide, 6 miles long. They can. I'm sure there's thousands of bunk spaces on there, so they could be sleeping anywhere. And I like the fact that they do in this episode go back to. At this point, so that in that other reality, they go back to that original. It looks very like it, the original set from the first couples of series, and I like that they do that. That they're sort of like, he's like, it's been so many years since we were here, and they're sort of talking about it. There's a glimmer of a moment where you're thinking, maybe Rimmer is gonna, could he accept this? Could this be? If you weren't watching this, this could be a cliffhanger ending where you're like, Rimmer is gonna make that choice and stay in that universe, and something's gonna happen. Maybe or maybe another cliffhanger they don't resolve. But it's that thing of him sort of going, sort of like, I can't do it. I can't live in this universe where you have done better than me. It's bittersweet in that way, really, because it's funny it's funny to watch, and obviously it's going to go back to the dwarf crew, but. It's also that bitter because you are sort of saying to the Rimmer, like, just shut the fuck up, just live with it, please. Like, you've got this one opportunity. It's I do kind of like this last moment of this show.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it feels right to me. I do think that some opportunities are missed with these. I like that Rimmer skips through a whole bunch of realities, but and some of them are just silly, right? There's Mr. Rat, not Mr. Cat. It's like everything's fine, but I'm not gonna live with this anthropomorphic rat. So some are silly. That reminds me a little bit of like Tom Strong or something in comics. But what I think is actually the best part of the episode isn't that final skip where he can't stand it, but actually the first skip, in which Rimmer is on Red Dwarf and you see Holly again, I mean, which we're about to see again, but I mean, Holly's back and it's like, yeah, talk about fan service. The crew is alive, and there's a nice reversal of the first episode as you go through, Rimmer asking if people are alive, if people are dead, and Holly keeps repeating, "Nobody's dead, nobody's dead." Arnold,
they're all alive. Arnold, they're all alive. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I think that's very clever, And then it ends with Holly announces there's a radiation leak, and the captain is in an escape pod, and says, "Oh no, I'm stuck in here," and so. Like, the horror of Arnold reliving the demise of Red Dwarf when it's just quite wonderful. And it's wonderful seeing the captain again. It's wonderful seeing Holly again. It's wonderful revisiting this moment. And obviously that and the concluding timeline are the highlights. But, for me, the first skip to go back to, oh, all right, I'm on Red Dwarf. Holly's back. everyone's alive. This sort of postmodern play on the first episode. I just thought that was the best part of the episode for me.
Mm.
So much fun.
No, it is good fun, and I like the fact they're willing to do that. They have that sort of like those callbacks and do that. And again, like sort of missed opportunities. I mean, if he is skipping through dimensions or alternate realities, like it would have been interesting to have done one. He could have jumped into Ace Rimmer's original dimension. Maybe sort of jumping into an office where there's a Robert Llewellyn. For the sort of whatever I forget what it's called now, Bongo. Or something like talking to Cat as a priest or those sorts of things. Like they would.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is good fun. And I do like some of the, I actually kind of like the one where they do play off and he is the Holly of the ship.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's Crichton comes and cleans his screen and wanders off. So yeah, there's some nice little moments in that that play off quite well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that it would have been better to, again, we have this problem of like the earlier part of the episode needs to be shortened. There's a good idea here. I think it's working much more here than in other episodes, but you're right that there's a kind of missed opportunity. Wouldn't it be fun to sort of skip into, Ace Rimmer and sort of other realities that we've seen? I mean, you could bring back Dwayne Dibley. You can do whatever you want because it's just another parallel universe you're going to see for a minute.
Well, the actress who played the female Lister in Dimension Jump way back in the first couple of series, like she's still a working actress. Like she still appears in things. So I would love that. Would have been if they could have got those actors together. Or even her, just for one. That would have been an interesting, that's the sort of thing. That would have been brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just so much more that could be done here. And there is a little bit of disappointment that I feel as we jump into reality. Like, there's one skip where the crew are monks. Okay, well, I get it. The Mr. Rat, it's fine, but there does seem to be a sort of like, this is imaginative, but not as imaginative as I want it to be,
Yeah. Yeah. There's like you say, there's the ones where he's just running down a corridor and doing some bits. I think, it's again, this could have been a lot more fun if they'd have given it just, I don't know, a couple more minutes to do some stuff. But it's fine. It's good. It's got some chuckles in there, but none of it sort of. What I would say is, and maybe it's even so, with series 11, there are moments in that series that stick with me.
Yes.
Where I'm like, oh yeah, so everything from, in after I think about in the first episode, Twentica, where they go to the bar, and they sort of they end up having to I forget the joke about the two sort of droids when they're sort of like 3 of 46 and all that sort of stuff. That I can think that makes me chuckle. The sort of the evil mechanoid, medical mechanoid of that steals the kidneys and all that sort of stuff of
and give and take,
and then. Yeah, and in Crisis, as with Rimmer Crichton in his sort of Ferrari red bodywork, and then them having a conversation with the universe and giving the universe a midlife crisis. Like I'm thinking back and going like, that was brilliant. Like there's some stuff in Series 11 that's really good. I mean, granted, like Can of Worms, the last episode isn't great, but even in that, there's some good moments.
Yeah, it's not terrible. I mean, that would have been one of the like okay episodes in this season.
Yeah, but season 12 just it never hits. In my opinion, it never hits that same high, that same level as I had with Series 11.
Yeah, I agree completely. How would you compare? I think I was thinking of if series 11 is our high from the sort of revived series, how do you compare 12 with 10?
Hmm. Um.
Because I was thinking like, 10 has the Jesus episode. It starts with
Mm,
Howard Rimmer. It's got Fathers and Sons, which kind of is the
yeah.
clever. I think that's a strong one. It's got Entangled, which is not so great. Dear Dave,
No.
which is like not so great, and then it ends with The Beginning, which kind of turns Rimmer into a working class hero, which
Yeah.
you
I.
object to.
Yeah. But again, I sort of like I liked their episodes again. Sort of like Lemons is I remember it was good fun. There's some good stuff in Trojan. I'm not sure if this whole thing of the reveal of Howard. Um, never sits completely right. But again, like, even some of the interactions of Dave of Lister doing the videos to himself and Father and Sons,
Yeah.
there are bits in Series 10 that I'm like, yeah, do you know what? There's some really funny bits in that really worked that I can't say I find in Series 12.
I agree completely. I think 10's better than 12, and it's
I,
sad because that's the last full season we've had so far.
yeah, I would say that 10 is on par, and I'm looking at sort of like we hit some sort of like rough spots in sort of like 6 and 7. 7 in particular to me has
Yeah,
got some really rough episodes. This is, I would say, 7 and 12 are where I really struggle. But then even with 7, you get Stoke Me a Clipper.
yeah, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, and like you said, Ticket to Ride with the JFK has got some interesting thoughts and some. Even that explores the consequences of sort of removing Crichton's guilt chip and that sort of thing. 12 just hasn't got anything of it. I honestly think, I'm looking back,
Well,
I might have to say that
7
12
also
maybe.
has the Rimmer dance.
Yeah, from Blue, which is
Yeah.
So you do get some really good moments. I think 12 may be the weakest series to date.
Yeah, I think you might be right, and that I agree. That's right. And that's sad because that's 12, right? And I don't want
Mm.
to be one of those people who's like, oh, it just gets bad. It just gets worse as it goes on, because we don't agree with that. I think 8 is a really strong series. I think 8 is
Mm.
better than,
7.
yeah, 8 is better than 7. I think, 8 is probably better than 6. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think 8's better than 6. I think 8 might even be better than 5 overall. Even with,
Ooh.
Back to Reality, we could argue that, but,
But like I said, but it hasn't gone here because I think 11 is a strong series. It has some moments that does stand up against some of those classic
mhm,
um those
yeah,
classic series.
absolutely.
It's just 12 feels tired. 12 feels tired.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
It hasn't got that polish. I think the weaker stuff in 10 we thought was kind of like a inferior version of previous episodes that sort of didn't that could have used another script polish, right? And I feel
mm,
like 12 is kind of all that.
yeah, yes, I would say that's a really I've gone back and watched. For this at least, we've watched all of them, but I will go back and I will watch pretty much all the series. I doubt I will ever go back and watch 12 in any sort of favourable way.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And I like Skipper maybe more than you, but
Mm.
I don't think it certainly doesn't. I'd rather keep, if I have to choose, 3 episodes from 10, 11, and 12, I'm choosing 1 from 10 and 2 from 11.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, our Series 12 review. We're so close to the end. The end is in sight. It's just that last bit to go. In the next episode, we will be talking about The Promised Land, the feature-length special that was released in 2020. One of the only good things to come out of 2020. So, if you want to get in contact with us, tell us what you think about what we've said so far. Have you enjoyed these reviews? Do you enjoy Red Dwarf? Let us know. Find us on Twitter at PodTimeSpace, and we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a great week, and I shall see you next time.